dive in.
Yes, Sissy was coming. I don't know her.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. So I'm Chef Jessica. If you guys don't know who I am yet or haven't joined yet, you're in week 4 of costing.
Yep,
Hopefully, maybe because that's what we're kind of going over today is week
yep,
4 stuff.
yep.
Chef Sissy may or may not be joining. She is in a snowstorm, so her internet is like in and out.
Where is she? Is she in Chicago?
She's in Colorado.
Colorado. Okay.
They got dumped with like 2 feet of snow and it's just calming down. So
Wow.
if she joins, cool. She's going to be in the chat. If not, it's just me today, but only a couple of us. So not a huge deal. But yeah, I mean, welcome everyone. We will kind of get started here. I'm going to share my screen. Huge thing. As we're going through some of these problems, I highly, highly, highly recommend you doing them on your phone as well with me. It will really help you just putting them in your calculator, kind of going forward with that. So what I'm going to do, we're going to kind of go over your equations, what you're working on this week in your costing class. We're going to do some examples, and then I do have some problems, flashcards really, that aren't so much math related, that are more just costing principles of what you're talking about. And I do want to know, because I was looking through your class this week, and this is the first week I've noticed it, that you have not one quiz, but you have 2. So you have 2 separate quizzes. They're shorter. They're only like 5 or 6 questions. So it's the same amount, but they're different things. So if you didn't notice that yet, it's happening. Don't think there's only one test. There's 2. They're right next to each other. Because I would totally miss that if I was in the class.
I didn't even see them.
Yeah, I'll show you guys. Actually, I'll show you at the end what I'm talking about. But yes, I did want to point that out. I didn't know if your chef or your instructor let you know that. But and at next week, I think the remaining of the class, there's 2 tests each week, right next to each other, same exact place on your dashboard. You'll find them, but there's not just one. So like this week, you have one that says yields, and then you have one that says inventory. So 2 kind of different, well, it's all the same principles. But anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you didn't already know. So we will get started. I'm going to start with some yield stuff. So basically, what is a yield? What is a yield percentage? Your yield percentage, if you will, is essentially how much usable portion or how much usable out of whatever you're making. So a good example, like we have here, we have beef weighs 10 pounds. So if you buy a slab of beef, picture a big old slab of beef you bought, you don't use that entire 10 pounds. You bought 10 pounds, you paid for 10 pounds, but that is not how much you're serving. Once you trim the fat and you roast it and you bones, whatever unusable portion, think of that. Think of waste is basically what you're calculating when you're thinking of your yield percentage, is how much can we use from how much we bought. So if you buy, let's say, oranges, you're not eating the peel, it's waste. You still have to buy the peel, it still counts as weight. Onions, and I mean, a lot of things have waste, unfortunately. Something just kind of going through costing ideas to just note, when you are running your own place and you are kind of doing this in the real life, in the real world, there are ways that you can use your waste in other ways so you're not wasting things. And that just keeps your food costs down. So like an example, we have our beef weighs 10 pounds. If you buy beef and you're not using the fat in the bones, you can use that to make your own stock. So you can make beef stock with water and your remaining trimmings that you've already bought, you've already spent money on, that you're not using to sell somebody, like, for your beef dish, but you're probably going to need beef stock for something in your kitchen. So that's a way just to use that, use it as a tool. You're already buying it. So why would you pay for beef stock already made if you could make it with your scraps, basically? Same thing, like, let's say, like my orange peel example. I'm sure you guys have all seen like the little fancy orange peel, like twist zest in like a cocktail or a martini. That's just one way you could use the peel. So just getting kind of creative. The less waste you have, the better it is. And maybe you can't use it for the same dish, but if you can use it somewhere else in your restaurant, on a dessert, in a drink, in a beer, I don't know, you can get creative. There's always ways to use your waste. So some really good restaurants and really good chefs have ways that they know they're going to buy this, they spend money on this, and they're going to use it for 6 different things because they don't want to waste it. So that is just, I just wanted to point that out. It's a little tangent. Okay, back to the math side, the yield percentages. So how do we find out our yield percentage? You basically take your end weight and you divide it by your starting weight, and that will get you a decimal. So you always have to times that by 100, move the decimal 2 spots over to the right to get it into a percentage. I'm gonna pull up my calculator here. We're gonna do this first example. We got beef weighs 10 pounds. It's what we bought. After we roast and trim, we have 7.5 pounds left, meaning we have 7.5 pounds of usable beef that we can sell. So you would take your 7.5 and you divide it by your 10, and we get 0.75. Again, timesing by 100, moving that decimal over would be 75%. So you have 75% yield in this beef example. Nice job, Erica. All right, so again, crate of bananas. Let's just kind of working through a couple examples before we diving in. We got our bananas. We buy a whole crate. It weighs 42 pounds. After peeling, they weigh 28 pounds. What is our usable portion? That's all this yield is asking. What is our yield percentage? How much can we use for how much we bought? So when you see yield percentage, think of that. So you take your end weight, which would be 28, you divide it by your 42, and we get, I don't like this answer here. I'm going to change this because you guys probably just witnessed what was going on. This would be 67%, not 60%. That's completely wrong because we got 0.666666666666667 times it by 100, rounding to the nearest percent. I would say this is 67%. One thing to note, as I've stressed, if you have not been in one of the workshops yet, always, 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 I'm going to say it a million times, make sure you are in the same unit of measure. So if this says pounds and this says ounces, got to convert it over to ounces. Erica, you have a question?
Okay, so what did you do? Because I caught the first answer, which is what I put in 666.666, and you didn't like the answer. It was funky. It was kind of funky.
No, you got it right. You had it right.
Okay, so
You're
it's not 67%. It's 666.
It's the same thing. Yes. Either way, I just rounded. The answer
Okay.
on my slide said 60%, which
Uh-huh.
I didn't like that math because it would be 67 or 66. If I was to round, it would be 67%.
Okay. Thank you, Chef.
Yeah, so you got it right. My slide was wrong. It was all. So don't worry on this. We will kind of go through more. I'm just going to walk through the formulas we're using this week. What is your edible portion price? So I'm going to tell you all right now, my biggest mistake, and you're going to hear me say it at least once today, when I see this AP price, we have as purchase price, edible portion price. I always screw up how I say it. I don't know why. Just bear with me. That's what it means. So edible portion price. This is basically you have figured out your cost of your ingredients. We've done that. We now know how to get our yield percent, which is basically how much we can use from what we bought. So now this is asking us to change how much our cost per portion is because you can't use everything you're buying. So this is asking you what is the edible portion price versus what you actually bought it for. Because again, our beef example, it costs, let's say $5.99 a pound. That's how much we spent. We have a 60% yield. So basically, although we're paying about $6 for 16 ounces, you're not using all those 16 ounces. So you kind of have to calculate how much you can use to be able to recalculate how much it costs. So You always have to have your yield first when you're trying to get your edible portion price. So you take your as purchase price, which in this case, $5.99, and you just divide it by your yield. Something to note, and we did this, I believe, last week. When you're dividing by a percentage, you are not dividing by a percentage. You are dividing by that decimal of the percentage. So you wouldn't divide by 60, you would divide by 0.6. Always, always remember that, because that's a big one. I said this last week. I'm going to say this every week for the end of time. If you do something in your calculator and it gives you a weird, funky answer, and you're like, huh, you did something wrong. And it could be as simple as instead of dividing by 0.6, you divided by 60. So kind of take a step back, reassess. If you do something funky like that, it will be obvious. So if we have $5.99, our yield is 60%. We would take $5.99, we would divide it by 0.6, and that gets us $9.98. So that is now our edible portion price. That is how much we spent for that pound of beef for how much we can use. Even though it was only $5.99 a pound, we're not using all of it, is basically what this is saying. When you are calculating your edible portion price, it will, yeah, I almost said almost always, but always will be more. So if you get an answer that is less than $5.99, there's no way that it costs you less, even though you can't use it all. So kind of, again, think back to like, what does this mean in context to what this question is asking? The question, when you see edible portion price, is asking how much you spend on it. How much was the new amount for how much you could use? So it should always be more than what your actual price was, because you have some of that waste, some of that scrap. So, I mean, and if you're doing your costing, nice job, Erica. When you're doing your costing, like for your actual restaurant, trying to break it down for your menu or for your week, the difference between $5.99 a pound and $9.98 a pound is a huge cost difference. I mean, if you're costing out your menu and you screw this up or you don't calculate that, you're going to be losing money left and right, and you won't be able to figure out why. And it's as simple as you're throwing away a bunch of stuff you're buying is essentially it. Erica, you asked if we round up. Yeah, I mean, when you're talking costing, you always round to the nearest cent. So we would round to this 8, 3 is under 5 or 4 and below. So it'd be $9.98. So let's go with that Creative Bananas example. Costs 68 cents a pound, has a yield of 66.67% yield. How would we figure this out? Again, we know our answer has to be more than 68 cents. Right there, flat out. You just know that. If you don't, now you do. So you take your 0.68, you divide it by our percentage as a decimal, which would be 0.6667, based on what we got here. See, this rounding's wrong. I would round that up, because you would round it up to $1.02.
I got the same thing you got, Chef. Yeah, same thing.
Perfect. Well, then we're on the same page. We're doing good. All right. So edible portion price. We just did this. This is the same slide. Yep. Okay. That's just another example. So something that you're going to see, and we'll go through some word problems together in a second, is this pre-cooked onion example. So it's basically comparing your pre-cooked to your fresh, or comparing like bought already 100% yield, we have no scrap, comparing it to a fresh with scrap. So when you see these, you do have to basically do the same math for both to be able to compare them. Now, I will give you guys some pointers on your test and on your quizzes you'll be doing this week if you have yet to do them. There are some word problems on there, and some of these word problems say, is raw or fresh better? Or is like pre-cooked or fresh better? At a cost perspective. So if you're going to do that, you basically have to break down your cost per portion with your 100% yield, your cost per portion with your 72% yield, and then you compare them. And then some of these questions aren't so much costing. They're like, why would you use fresh onions instead of pre-cooked onions? Has nothing to do with the math. So again, and I cannot stress this enough, read the question. read the question, because that question will tell you what you need to do, if you even need to do math, or if it's just asking you, why is this better? Why would you use this instead of this? And maybe the answer is from the cost, maybe it's not. Anyway.
So, Chef, right quick before we go any further, if we come across a question like that and it doesn't ask for math, what do we do?
So without telling you the answer, it'll be obvious.
Okay.
It'll be obvious. I'll just say that much.
Okay.
Basically, you don't always have to do math for each one. And some of the questions will just ask, like, why would you want to use fresh instead of pre-cooked? And the answer could easily be like, well, fresh is better because fresh just tastes better. So, Misty, you have a question?
Yes. Can I see that last slide just for a second?
Oh, this one?
I can hear you now.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll go. I was actually about to kind of go through some examples. I do want to touch on inventory, and I don't know if you guys have started the equations of inventory, but I do know you have questions about inventory. So it's not so much math, but it's more or less like your inventory, just to kind of briefly touch on it. You have your beginning inventory, which is basically like how much you have to start. So looking in your closet, looking in your pantry and your refrigerator, how much stuff do we have? That is your beginning inventory. Your cost, your purchases, every single thing you bought together would be your total cost, total purchases. Usually for a week is kind of what they're talking about. Your ending inventory is basically how much do we have left after the week's over. So something to note, your ending inventory from one week will always be your beginning inventory the next week, because that's how much you still have in your pantry. So to get your total food cost, you have your starting amount, you add all of the stuff you bought to it, and then you subtract how much you have left, which is basically telling you how much you spent on food that went out of your kitchen that week, that was served to guests, served to people. How much did you spend on your food is the gist here. We will definitely get more involved in this. I just kind of wanted to touch on what inventory was. You basically have your food costs, which is how much you spend on your food. You know, you have your labor costs, your overhead costs, other costs, just in the restaurant industry. You total all those up, you get your total amount of all your costs for all the things, and you basically have how much you had in sales, and you just do straight subtraction. I mean, your sales minus how much you spent on everything cost-wise, not just food, everything you spent money on, equals your profit or your revenue, how much money you're making. If that number is negative, you're losing money. It's basically what that one means. But let me kind of jump in to some more of these EP, purchase yield math problems, so we can practice a couple of these fun things. Okay, so looking at our first problem. Now, again, and I feel like a broken record, read the question. I cannot stress that enough. It's just reading the question, making sure you know what this question is asking before you start answering it. Because on a lot of these, you will, and I don't want you to get confused. Break it down, slow down, read the question. This week, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat it, it gets wordy. It just does. There's a lot of words. There's a lot of words with very limited numbers. And you only need to do some of the things with some of the numbers. So always, always, always make sure you're reading that question. That question will tell you what numbers you should be looking at, where to find them, and what to do with them. And you can have your equations up. So have your equations up from your chef while you're doing the test, because there's no point in not doing that. You're allowed to, use full advantage of it. So let's kind of work through this one together. So we have Chef Sophia, and feel free to throw your answers in the chat too. So what I like to do with these wordy ones is skip the words just off the bat. Go to what this question is asking, then go back and read the question, because then you kind of know what you're looking for. So our first question is, what is the EP price, edible portion price, for fresh onions after caramelizing? Ooh, tongue twister. Okay. So now that we know, we are looking for our EP price of fresh onion. That's what we're looking for. That's what we need to know. Chef Sophia found pre-cooked onions. That was $9.47 per pound as purchase price. 100% yield. She wants to save money, but isn't sure this is a better deal than cooking the fresh onions herself. Okay, so these are pre-cooked onions, so none of this matters because we're not even talking about them. So we're going to keep kind of going. She currently pays an as purchase price. Yeah, I always want to say something else there. As purchase price of $2.30 per pound for fresh onions. Ding, ding, ding. We're talking fresh onions in the question. So this is what we need to know. We got $2.30 per pound. Her yield is 50%. After peeling and cooking the onions, aka caramelizing, what is that edible portion price? So like, just again, to kind of reiterate what I was saying, this top part doesn't even matter in what it's asking. Will it matter in a different question? Definitely. Does it matter right now? No, not at all. So you're basically calculating your edible portion price of these onions. Do we have answers in the chat? See, Erica threw one in there. So we have our $2.30, and we would divide that by our yield, which is 50%. Now, you don't do it as the whole percentage. You're doing it as a decimal. So you do 0.5. And that gets us $4.60 would be our answer. That is our edible portion price. And so essentially, and I just want to show you, if we screwed this up, let's say we divided this by 50, because we forgot it's a decimal. Easy to do. I'm one of these dyslexic people where I put things backwards. So this gets us 5 cents with rounding. Why in the world would our edible portion price be 5 cents when we're scrapping stuff and we spent $2.30? It's not going to be. It's just in context, that's wrong. So if you're getting answers that are like out of whack, just know that you're doing something wrong, whether you're flip-flopping it or you forgot a decimal. It's just a good way to go back and check your work. So always look at it in context. We know it's going to be more than $2.30 because we're throwing stuff away. If your answer is not more than $2.30, reassess what you did. All right, moving on this one. So next problem. Again, I really just, with these word ones, especially in week 4, I hate reading the whole question. I mean, you still have to read the whole question. I shouldn't have said that, but skip it. Find out what it wants to know first. So our next problem, edible portion price for fresh onions. So again, going back to the top, Alice is talking about pre-cooked onions. Those don't matter right now. We want to know about our fresh onions. So we know our pre-cooked onions are up here. Next part, she currently pays an as purchase price, $2.75 per pound for fresh onions. Same thing, what we want to know. Her yield is 60%. What is the edible portion price? So you take your $2.75 and you divide it by your 0.6. And you should get $4.58 if you're doing the math right. Nice job, Erica. All right, so I'm going to kind of skip a few of these because these are all the same. Oh, this one's a good one. See, okay, where Bridget is here. What is the edible portion price for the pre-cooked onions? So this, again, make sure you're reading the question, knowing what you're answering before you start doing math. Because it would be so easy to jump in and be like, oh, it's this, because you're doing the math of the fresh onions. It's not asking you that. It's asking you your pre-cooked onions. Your pre-cooked onions, which are at the top of this problem now, have 100% yield. You have no waste. It's the same as your as purchased price, which would be your $7.50. Now, I do want to show you, you can do the same math. You don't have to when it's 100%. But if you did the same math, so we have $7.50 per pound was our yeah, exactly. And you divide it by 100%, which would be 1. We just get $7.50. So if you want to do the math, you can. You don't need to, but it is a good way to double check your work. So this is kind of what I was talking about when I was kind of like, read the question. This one says, which onions have less waste? So one of them, just going back to the same format, one of them's a pre-cooked onion, 100% yield. One of them is a fresh onion with 75% yield. It is not asking you what math to do. It's asking you which one has less waste. The one that has 100% yield would have less waste. So again, not asking you to do math, not asking you which one's better. It's just asking you which one you waste less. So that you can just do based on knowing you have 100% yield. Misty, do you have a new question or was your hand just still raised?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think.
Oh, no, you're good. I just wasn't.
Do I have to like lower my hand each time I ask a question? My bad.
No, you're good. I just didn't know if you put the button again.
And I always have a question, and it's one of the most annoying parts about me that people do not like.
I love questions, so no worries.
No, the question that I put in the chat, and I'm on my phone with this, so the audio might be better than it is through Zoom with the laptop.
Oh, I see it now. Yes.
But is this? I'm a note taker sometimes, not always, but all this stuff is very new for me. So I like math, but the simple math problems sometimes, give me trouble. So is this available after today? Like, is it being recorded? Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Great.
Yeah, I will show you guys at the end. Everything we do workshop wise, always recorded, always put on our tutor page in the archive workshops. So you will always have access to them. Definitely.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of jumping in, Renee, you had a question?
Yes, Chef. I would like to know if anytime we have this kind of problem, we always have to divide by a decimal, right?
Not every problem, no.
Not every problem, okay.
No. For what we're doing right now, yes, but not every problem, no. You're going to definitely need to add, subtract, multiply, depending on what we're doing. Okay. Which is why it's a good thing to have your equations in front of you or just written down somewhere, because then you can see based on what the question's asking, which equation you should use.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
So basically, Chef, we're using all of math, adding, subtraction, multiplications, and adding, subtraction. We're using everything.
Yeah. Yep. And you got to know which one to use when. So that's kind of where order of operations, just knowing which one to look at, which equation you're using. Like when you're looking to get your edible portion price, yes, you're always dividing by your yield as a decimal. And but if it's asking you your, cost per portion, you're going to multiply. So correct. There's different circumstances, which is why it's good to have the equation.
And then I wanted to say to the class, Chef, if you don't mind, YouTube has a lot of like math, some baker's math, but just showing us how to divide and do our and do the adding, subtracting the way you guys are showing us how to do it. Just, just in case anybody, wanted to know, YouTube, all you gotta do is put it in, Baker's Math, and it'll show us percentage, decimals, and everything. Because I got up this morning at 7 o'clock, and that was my Sunday. I was looking at math.
Yeah, Baker's Math's different than costing, so don't let that confuse you depending on which classes you guys are in. But yes, definitely a good resource. Let's jump back in just so we have some time to go over this and the inventory still. So again, looking at Sophia, this question here, same thing, jumping down to that question because there's a lot of words. Which onion is better to buy from a cost perspective? So essentially what this is asking us, which onion makes more sense, regardless of what you think is best or, why one would be better than the other, which one's more cost effective, basically. So in order to figure this out, you need to basically know your edible portion price for both. Your first one, we got our pre-cooked onion, $2.50 per pound, 100% yield. So we know this is just $2.50 per pound because there is no waste. Now, same thing, she currently pays as purchase price $1.75 per pound for fresh onions, but there's a yield of 60% after peeling, cooking. So you would need to find out your edible portion price. So your $1.75 divided by your percentage as a decimal, so our 0.6, and that gets us $2.92. Again, not the answer. You're comparing this $2.92 to your $2.50. So based on that, your better onion as a cost perspective would be your pre-cooked onions because it costs less. It's $2.50 versus $2.92. So for when you see this, you do have to do both and then compare them. TB, yes, I see your hands raised.
Are you at some point, Chef, are you gonna go back to that last slide, or you have a little while to go forward?
This one?
No, not that one, the next one.
The inventory stuff that I was mentioning?
The inventory, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we're almost there. Those are more just kind of flashcards, but yes.
Okay, thanks.
Definitely. So let's see. So again, I just want to kind of touch base because a lot of these are similar. We just don't need to go through them all. If we have time, we can definitely jump back here, but TB is totally right. Thanks for time checking me. We need to cover inventory somewhat. So again, what would be the advantage of using fresh onion? That has nothing to do with math at all. It's just asking you, why would you want to use a fresh onion versus a pre-cooked onion? What'd you say, Erica?
Because there's no waste. With when you use a pre-cooked onion, there is no waste. When you use a fresh onion, we have the peel, we have the ends, we have waste.
So you're not wrong. That is correct. But this question's asking, what's the advantage of fresh onions? You answered, what's the advantage of pre-cooked onions? But you're not wrong. You're totally right. So like, just from an ideal perspective, if we had fresh onions, that's just better because it's fresh.
Yes.
Because it's fresh food versus like pre-cooked frozen diced onions from Gordon's or a fresh onion from a farm. So again, has nothing to do with math. It's just asking you, what's the advantage of using this one? Like if it said fresh onions, I would say something like, because it's fresh or higher quality or better product. If it asked this in reverse, exactly what Erica said. Your pre-cooked, you have no scrap, you have no waste. You're using 100% of what you're buying. So you can answer it for both, and you can always find an advantage for both, definitely. So that one is huge to note. Let's do a couple of these and then I'll jump into the inventory stuff because this is where there's more math. Not so much words, but math. So Ashley owns a barbecue company that sells pulled pork for $14.95 per pound. After it is smoked for 10 hours, she buys the pork for an as purchase price of $4.25 per pound. They weigh 11 25 pounds each. Once they're done smoking, they weigh 7.5 pounds each. Question is asking, what is the yield of the pork after Ashley is done smoking them? So you would take your after cooked weight. So once they're done smoking, they weigh 7.5. So that's your after cooked 7.5. And you divide that by your pre-cooked weight, which would be 11.25 pounds, 11.25. I said that weird. 11.25 pounds. So again, it gives you all these prices, but it's not asking you anything about prices. It's asking you your yield. So you take your 7.5 and you divide by your 11.25. Hey, that's the same yield we had before. Times it by 100, I would round up, and we get 67%. Misty, you have a question?
Yes. So, well, first of all, I was going to ask you personally, is there an application that you have done like with this? I mean, just outside the word problem, sometimes I have trouble connecting word problems. I mean, these are, simply stated, but sometimes I get lost in the wording. Like, is there an item that you use in your chefing and in your cooking, your restaurant or whatever, that like where this is directly applicable every day?
All the time. All the time. Everything. Yes.
Okay. I mean, because it seems important, obviously.
Yes, very important. A big thing is when you're talking scrap. So again, anything that has waste, you have to like a great one. You have to buy broccoli at the store, and you're not serving the stem of the broccoli usually. You're only serving the florets or the flower parts or the trees, as I called them as a kid. The tree part, not the stem part. But you have to buy the whole thing. So you bought it, but you can only serve some of it. Can you do something with the stem? Probably. Are you going to? Hopefully, maybe. Depends on what you're doing. A big one is usually a lot of meat. Like if you're going to buy a whole salmon, let's say a whole fish, you buy the whole fish, but you're not using that whole fish. You're not serving the whole fish. You're filleting it and slicing it and serving it to somebody as a slab of, here's your fillet of salmon. That's 8 ounces. And that, again, and this kind of touches on the inventory side, that is why having standardized recipes, standard procedures in your restaurant, in your establishment is so important. If you have, again, on my salmon example, you buy one salmon and you have one chef that can slice it and cut it and get down to the bone, right on the edge of that like surface of the skin. And that chef can get you, let's say 82% yield from that fish. That's great. You're serving 82% of this big old portion of salmon. And let's say your next guy who comes in the next day does the exact same thing, and he can only get you 65% because he's not as good at filleting that salmon because he doesn't have as much experience with cutting a fish like that. That right there, who do you want to do it? You're going to want the guy who can get you more fish from that fish you bought because you bought the fish regardless. So the one chef who can now get you more is going to make you more money because you can serve more of it. And that's why it's really important to have standardized recipes, having standard procedures, having everyone doing it the same. Not only will keep it consistent for your customers and serving it. I mean, if you've ever gone to a restaurant and you get an 8-ounce salmon and it's like this big, and then you go like the next week and the 8-ounce salmon is this big. What? Like that's going to throw your customer off. We've all been there. My burrito example is my best one. Like I've had a burrito made at a restaurant that's tiny, same restaurant. The next time I get a ginormous burrito. And if you do it the other way, now I'm expecting a big burrito and I get served tiny burrito. And now I'm all grumpy and upset because I didn't get my full serving. In reality, the guy who gave me a big burrito shouldn't have been giving me that much stuff anyway. So So, I mean, it's so important not only to have it figured out and have your math figured out for the costing of your dish, but having it consistent. Because if you have that variance from chef to chef or person to person, how are you going to figure out your costing when every other guy's doing it different? You're not. Your costing's going
Right.
to be wrong no matter what. So it is definitely, I mean, anything costing wise is important just because money's important. And if you can't make money
I
in your restaurant, you're going to
yeah.
fail. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sorry, you might have heard, I had a phone call coming in there. I just declined it. Um, yeah, I mean, that's the thing about, I mean, to me, if you're working in business, I mean, you know, you have to have your money in the positive. I mean, more often than the negative, because,
right. And if you
you
have
know,
one chef that, like I was saying with my salmon, who fillets it that badly because they're just not good at it, or they didn't care, or they're lazy, or they don't have experience, whatever reason, there's numerous reasons. But if you have that in your restaurant, chances are you're not going to have that guy doing the salmon filleting. You're just not.
Mhm.
Or you're going to replace him with somebody who can. Hopefully you don't replace the guy if he's good, but anyway, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, I mean, this is super, super important.
Well,
Just all of it.
and to go off that, like just thinking about like that example, you know, if you have the chef that, one person, I mean, do you weigh the, you know, I guess you weigh the yield, like if you want to get the, how much waste that you're having to do something with,
You
you
would
know,
weigh it. Yeah,
you just weigh it and get that percentage and then compare, obviously.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So like if you peel onions, like we were talking onions, you buy a 10-pound bag of onions, you peel them, you dice them, you slice them, you put it in your big old container in your walk-in cooler. You basically, you bought 10 pounds onions. After you slice and dice them all, you weigh them, and that's how you figure out your yield. Now, you don't have to do it in all reality in the real world, in the real life. You're not doing that all the time. But as an owner, as a head chef, you should be doing it, I would say, at least once a month, just to make sure that, like, depending on what it is too, I mean, maybe not so much onions because like it's onions, but if you're buying full dang salmon, that's expensive. If you're buying a full cow or a full slab of something,
Yeah.
and you're
Mhm.
expecting your head chef to be able to cut it, manipulate it, and get XYZ out of it, and they're not, you're going to need to know that. Definitely. I mean, and if the expectation is this, and each time you do it, you're only getting this, then you need to adjust your cost for what that expectation is. You need to lower your yield percentage in turn, which either would raise your costs, or you need to cut labor, or you need to adjust based on that. Definitely. Let me jump in because I do want to kind of go over some inventory stuff. I know you aren't getting into the math of it. That's next week. So I don't want to kind of go too far, but you do have some word problems that are more or less kind of thinking about like what we're talking about, Misty. So great lead in there. It's just kind of
Thank
like,
you for
yeah,
going over
no,
that.
it's really just the bread and butter. It's not so much the math. You need the math. You have to have the math. You definitely need it for costing and stuff, but you also need to understand the principles behind why you're doing it and why it makes sense and why you need to know some of this stuff. So again, feel free to put your answers in the chat, throw them out there. Some of these are true or false. Some of them actually have an answer. I don't know. This is what I could come up with to kind of get you guys prepared. So we can kind of dive into this. Beginning inventory does not matter when attempting to calculate your weekly food costs. True or false? False. Anyone else agree with that? I would say false. It does matter. You need your
Gotta
beginning
know.
inventory to
I was
know
just
how
about
much
to
your
say,
food
know how
costs.
much to get. Yep. Go on, chef.
Yes. So you need your beginning inventory. You need to know your total purchases. You need to know your ending inventory to know how much your food cost is. You just do. So it is important. It does matter. Let's kind of jump in here. How do you determine your total purchases or how much of everything you bought? It's easier. Don't overthink it. It's easier than you think.
You just add it together?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly it. Yeah, I'm like, it's easier than you could make it. But yeah, I mean, if you spend $100 on this, $800 on this, 3,000 on this, you spent this much at Gordon's, you spent this much at this, you bought this, you spent this much on new aprons. I mean, it's not just food, any money you spend, that's your cost, the sum of them all. All right, what part of the food cost percent equation would you need to increase in order to achieve a lower food cost percent? I don't know why my screen keeps doing that. So you know your food cost percent equation, your food cost divided by your sales equals our food cost percent. We want to achieve a lower food cost percentage. What would you do to achieve that?
Food cost percentage. You would buy your food cost percentage.
You want to lower your food cost percentage. So
Okay.
if we wanted our food cost percentage lower than what it currently is, so you're doing your math, you're running your numbers at your restaurant, and you're like, man, this food cost percentage is just a little too high. It's 32%. I want it more like 25%. What would you do in the equation itself? Or I guess, what part of the food cost percent equation would you need to increase? So what would need to increase to achieve a lower food cost? See, I know you guys know it, but you just have to think about it like
Hey,
in
what would you
terms.
the question is, what would you increase?
Yes, what would you increase to lower your food cost?
Oh,
I'm glad you read the full question though.
Okay. Well, so what is all purpose? I'm sorry, what is, I wrote down purpose on accident and I had to write down purchases. So I misread my notes. What does all purchases mean in this exactly? I'm a little confused about that. Like beginning
question.
inventory plus all purchases minus ending inventory equals total food cost, right? Is that what was on the slide?
Correct.
So,
yes.
So I'm guessing, I mean,
your all purchases would be like how much you spend on food, how much you spend on, let's say if you were going to buy some towels or dish soap, or how much you spend on, well, actually in that equation, it's just talking your food cost, how much you spend on food.
Okay, so the beginning inventory is just like for the, I mean,
that
like
is so
you would,
yeah,
like food and chemicals. Like this isn't like an all encompassing, like when we're talking about inventory, we're just talking about food inventory for this one.
Yes, for
What
that you're talking about. So everyone knows Misty is talking about something that is not this slide. She is talking about
increase
this slide. So just don't want anyone to get confused there. For this, yes, your beginning inventory. So to put it in context, you walk into your pantry, your walk-in cooler, your refrigerator. Your beginning inventory is how much you have. Like right now, you probably have flour at your house. You probably have butter. You probably have olive oil. You're not going to buy them. You have them. So your beginning inventory is how much you have of everything. How much do you have in your pantry, in your refrigerator? Then throughout the week, you buy stuff. You're buying food. You're buying this. You're buying that. And then you're selling stuff throughout the week. Your ending inventory is how much you have left. So after you started with this, you bought this, we've sold a bunch, and this is what we have left. So this is basically asking you what your total food cost was, because some of the stuff you didn't use all of, like again, you buy olive oil, you're not using the whole bottle probably, you still have some left to use later. So you're not going to factor it in as a cost right now. I do want to jump back to some of this though, because these are definitely important. And we never answered this. So what part of the food cost percent equation would need to increase? Somebody said it right in the chat. Who was it? It was Bethany. Wow. You would increase your sales. Your sales would need to increase if you were increasing something. Sales would need to increase to achieve a lower food cost percent. Now, if you decreased your food cost, that would also achieve a lower food cost percent. But this was asking what would we increase? You would increase your sales to get a lower food cost percent. Why do you need to know your ending inventory? Kind of back to that question we were just looking at with Misty on that slide. Why would you want to know your ending inventory when you're done for the week? Erica, do you have a question or do you know the answer?
I think I know the answer. You need
Okay.
to know your ending food costs. So
Ending inventory.
you would need to know your ending inventory. So one, you'll know how much to order and you'll know what you ended with so that you will know what to order.
So you're not wrong in that sense. Your ending inventory for your week
It's gonna be
is going to be your beginning inventory the next week. But yeah, Erica, you're not wrong either. You need to know how much you need to order for the week. So to determine how much you use that week tells you that's why you need your ending inventory. And it also tells you how much you're starting with the
So
file.
yeah, you know what? I have my our helpful hit charts. I have all of them printed out, and I was looking through them, and that was the only thing I left out. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. So if your total profit is a negative number, what does that mean?
you lost money.
Yup.
A lot of money.
If that's negative, you lost money and you didn't make a profit. That's no bueno. Definitely. That one was easy. How would you calculate your profit or revenue? And I guess if you guys don't know that, profit and revenue, very interchangeable words. I told you this earlier. I'm just curious if anyone caught me telling you.
You would add them all together, Chef?
Well,
And then
you would,
you would subtract out what your fixed cost is, what your sales cost is, what your labor cost is, and it would show you, you would subtract it from your total sales to end up with everything, and it will show you what your food cost is once you subtract everything out of your total sales.
yeah, so this isn't, yes, you're right. This isn't asking you what your total sales are. This is asking you how you find out how much you made, how much you found out your profit is. So you would take your total sales, how much you sold, how much money you made, minus everything you spent money on, whether that be your food, your labor, other costs, overhead costs, electric bill, everything. So you subtract everything that you have to spend money on, and that will get you how much you have left over for how much money you made. Also very important. Your food cost percent always has to be 30%. True or false?
Or is that, I mean, that's what I heard was recommended. True.
I like how you said that like you were guessing. Like maybe.
Most of the time I'm trying to make the best educated guess possible.
So no, I'm glad you said that because, okay, I have to tell you all, Escoffier is not wrong. They have the 30, 30, 30, 10% rule. They teach it, they like force it ingrained in your brain. So this is why I actually put the question. This is false. It doesn't have to be 30%. It can be higher, it can be lower. But if it's higher, you need to adjust your costs elsewhere. If it's lower, you can also, maybe your labor is 40%, and that's cool because your food cost is 20%. So you can adjust those. The reason they have the 30, 30, 30 rule leaves you 10% for profit. It's not a bad rule of thumb. It's a good rule of thumb to go by, but it doesn't mean you have to have 30%. It doesn't mean you have to have 30% labor. It just is a good basis so that you're making a profit. I mean, I have a really good example. I think I told some of you this last week. There's a restaurant near me, very good restaurant, like super busy, tapas, really good chef. I mean, amazing. And his food cost percentage is under 10%. I mean, it's like 8-9% for his food cost. His labor costs, 40-45%. So, I mean, he makes up his costs in that sense. He pays his chefs really well. And then because of that, he also expects his chefs not to have any waste and to use everything that they can so that they can keep their food costs low. So there are, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're paying somebody double what the kitchen next door is paying, you're going to expect them to know how to fillet that salmon better than the guy who's making half the price as you. So you can adjust these accordingly, but you also can't have them all higher because then you're going to be losing
Oh,
money.
that's your story, Chef, last week. I remember that story.
Yeah, that it's a good example because I mean, and you can have it the other way. Like I think I was talking about Taco Bell. I don't know their food cost percentage, but they sell it dirt cheap. It's $1 a taco, and they pay their guys minimum wage. So their food cost percentage is probably pretty high. I mean, how much do they spend per taco? Probably more than 30 cents for how much it costs you to buy it
A
for your
regular
dollar.
taco will cost you here in Michigan, cost you $1.35.
Yeah. So the ingredients for that cost probably, I mean, their food cost percentage is probably more than 30, but their labor cost, because they pay minimum wage, is probably lower than 30. So there's ways to do it. You just have to make sure that the other ones are adjusted, if that makes sense.
So can you, I'm sorry, before we move on from the 30, 30, 30, 10, I know that this is on, I mean, my professor told, we have notes on it. I'm familiar with this. I can't remember all of the parts of it just at the moment because I don't have my other, other slide.
No, that's a great question. So your 30, 30, 30, 10 rule is essentially 30% food cost, 30% labor cost, 30%, they call them other costs. Your other costs are basically everything else, like whether that's rent, electricity, cable, laundry, whatever you're spending other money on that isn't food or labor is your other costs. Leaving 10% for profit is the rule of thumb that they teach. Can you go from that? Yes. Can you switch it? Yes.
So I'm sorry, it's 30, 30, 30, 10?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
So it equals 100.
So food cost 30%, labor cost 30%, and then other costs 30%, and then the 10 is the profit.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm sorry that I interrupted you. I apologize.
No, it's good. So I'm sure somebody else had the same question. So no worries there, Misty.
Thank you.
It's always good to know.
I'm always losing money in my mind. I'm always losing money. So that's probably why I'm not making money. Maybe I need to relax.
No, it's actually, I'm with you. I always have that mindset. Like I call it a broke mindset. Like I always am assessing everything like I'm really poor, even if I'm not really poor, or like if I'm okay with money for a minute. If I pretend I'm poor, I spend money better. So it's like,
yeah,
it's good to have, it's not a bad thing to feel like you're always losing money because then you're like pinching pennies and trying to be better with your costing. So it's not a bad thing to have that mindset, and it's a good way to save money too. And if you can adjust your costs where you can pinch pennies, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you make more money if you can? I mean, that's
well, yeah, and especially if you're in a position where other people's salaries are like, in your basket of what you've got to do with your job or whatever. So, I mean, that's enormous with stress and everything else. It's like, I was going to say something. I forgot. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're good. We're almost kind of through the, sorry, I'm kind of pushing time, but I do want to just go over the last few of these because they are good ones to know. You should put away your receiving orders as fast as possible, regardless of quantity ordered. True or false?
False.
I would imagine true.
False. You don't want true because that means your inventory could be messed up, incorrect, or you could not have all of your items. If they put it away fast and you don't know what you got, or you don't know if the fish came in and it was fresh. You don't know if the cake mix came in and it didn't have cake worms, because cake mix do get cake worms. So it's a false answer. Do not ever answer that true.
Yeah, it's false for all the reasons Erica said, and for the fact, like if you ordered, let's say 3 cases of this, let's say cake batter. We ordered 3 cases of cake batter and you only got 2 in, but you paid for 3, that's a problem. If you, let's say the other way, you're expecting to get so much of this and you only have so much of this, and then you think that maybe somebody's stealing something and it has nothing to do with any of your employees, nothing to do with your food costs, nothing to do with waste, nothing to do with how much is sold. It is straight just you didn't get how many you ordered.
You didn't
And you're
check
not going to
the
know
inventory.
that unless you check it when the guy comes in with the
Something to
truck.
deliver. Yep.
So always, always, always make sure you're checking your receiving orders. I guess if you're shipping, do that too. But in the restaurant industry, you're usually receiving.
But
So
what they say in the book too is you want to make sure that if you know you have inventory coming that day, make sure you have 1 or 2 specific people there for that purposes.
yes and no. The book says that, and I agree with it. In the real world, in the real life situation, you're not going to have somebody else scheduled and be paying somebody else and making your labor costs more just because you have an order coming in. You are going to want to make sure somebody you have on staff knows that order is coming in at 2. They know that's their priority. You're off the line right now because there's an order in.
Like utilities, because
Exactly.
that's what utilities do. Or
Yep.
like that's it's for a question.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you are right in the book and like what they're teaching, have an extra person, but you also have to make sure your labor costs are under control. And if you're receiving orders 6 days a week, you're not going to schedule an extra person every day for an order. You're just not.
Correct.
In the
Correct.
real world, you're not.
That's true. True, chef.
So
True.
it does make sense too, but yeah, somebody, I don't know who just said it, but Beth Ann, you got this one right. Why would you want to date items when they came in, even though they're not opened yet?
This
Using
little-
the
this-
FIFO.
Yeah, because we have to use the first in, first out.
Exactly. So even though it's not opened yet, if you order something in November and you order the same thing in February, you're going to want to use that one out of your freezer from November before you touch the one from February, even though none of them are open, just to keep things fresh in rotation.
First
And you're
one
not
in, last one out. That's the rule. It's called you use your old material, you use your old food, and it's not old, but you use your most dated food and not your current dated food.
Which is why you need to date it when it comes in,
That's the
not
reason
when
for
you
dating
open it.
it.
I mean, you need to
Exactly.
open, yes, you need to date it when it's open too. But
Mhm.
that's why, like, you'll see dates on boxes and stuff,
Yep.
even though that
Mhm.
box isn't open, so you know what day it came in, or at least what month, what year, depending on what it is. So that one's important. Oops, last one, because we are definitely, we're over time today. You should let your staff be creative with their dishes and not have them refer to a standardized recipe.
False.
False. Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Standard recipes, we've kind of talked about this earlier, just keeps it consistent. Your inventory, your food costs, your waste, everything's consistent when you know everyone is doing the same thing. I am going to stop it here because, like I said, we are definitely over. Any last questions? I covered a lot today. I want you to know there's some of this like principle of just logical thinking about controlling your costs at a restaurant. And then there's also examples on your tests that do involve the math. Be prepared for both. Oh, hold on. One last thing, because I did want to point this out to you because I know I mentioned it on a different slide. Don't mind me. I'm gonna go here. Sorry, I'm gonna just kind of click through really fast. You don't need to worry about how I got here. All right. Sorry, I did not have this ready, but I do want to jump down to your week 4. Right here where your tests are, you have one that says yields and you have one that says inventory. Make sure if you don't have both, then it's just me and I'm losing my mind, but your week 5 has both. So just make sure you're doing both tests if you have both. I don't know how to get the student view, but I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Chef.
Yes, definitely. Well, I appreciate everyone coming and all your helpfulness. And does anyone have any questions right now? Sorry, I know we went over, but any last minute questions? How are you guys feeling on this?
I feel
Oh.
okay. I'm sorry
Good.
if I asked too
No.
many questions.
No, you're good. Beth Ann, I will show you because that is something I mentioned that I didn't show you. So on your class page, in your start here section, if you don't know this already, this is how you get to our tutor page, online tutoring, right here. This is us. This is how you book a one-on-one session. That would be here. And this is all of us. These are the workshops we have, the schedule for them. So there are other costing ones on Tuesday evening and Friday afternoon. Chef Sissy teaches those. She's great. I do have to tell you, we have different structures in how we teach costing, but maybe if I'm confusing the crap out of you, she would help you better. So you got both of us for that very reason. These are all the Zoom links to join all those when we have them. Here's our costing ones. If you keep scrolling, workshop archives. Woo, I cannot speak. This is where you will find costing. And this is where you will find them all loaded up. So there's one, the one from Chef Sissy, who went through kind of the same thing we talked about, but on Friday. So you can go into here, all these YouTube videos, they're basically just this recording in YouTube. So you have access to all of those.
Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions right now, or?
Yes. You did say for calculating the profit, it is the total sales minus the food cost, correct? The total cost.
No, your total profit is your total, your total cost. It's not just your food cost. It's how much you spend on everything subtracted from your sales.
Okay, gotcha. So it's the total cost minus the total sales.
Other way.
Other way? Okay.
Yeah, because basically your total sales is how much you made that week at your restaurant, how much was bought, total sales, how much was spent. So you got this much in sales, and then you subtract how much you've spent on everything, whether it is food, labor, other things, whatever. You subtract everything you spent money on because it's spent, and that gives you what is left over, how much you made from your sales.
Okay.
Oh, good, Beth Ann. Awesome. Cool. Well, I think we are good for today.